Hi! I don't remember when I was so excited last time in my life, but I definitely wanted to film right away while I still have that energy in me. My book arrived and my pins arrived, so really want to show off the goodies. Let's do my book first, because I'm trying to do a writer's channel, right? Not a illustrator channel, so let's talk about book. I have mentioned it in the beginning, but this sort of weaned away from my videos. But I was doing a big fantasy story that is more like maybe young adult, which had a lot of world building, and it was a bit more like thick in itself. I'm gonna show the book. I printed out my manuscript in a binded book edition, let's say. I'm not. I'm just consider it not to be successful for querying. I'm not very good at querying big amounts, but basically my books, when we fail, we sometimes end up being binded and put away in the shelf. But I'm still very excited. I still put a huge amount of work in this, and it's cool. Read Riot. Okay, I walk you through. So it's a book. It's a fantasy story about the island full of portals and monsters, and I just love that concept and obviously world building around it. The design is of the cover is done by me with my lack of drawing skills, right? And I thought it was very fitting. My partner is a big Avatar fan, and he was like, "Oh, it sort of reminds him probably of Avatar." Going forward, right? I did a little scheme about timeline. So this book is written in multiple timelines. So I'm not gonna, like, you can see it in detail. That's not a problem. It's not a huge spoiler. I don't know if you can see a lot. But basically it says important dates because I put a date on a chapter, and it's not very chronological. Some of them are flashbacks from the past. So there is a present narrative, let's say, of the expedition into this island. But there is also that story of the main character from before and going back to the childhood and sort of based off memories. But it's actually written in journals. So there is a journal narrative and there is a present expedition narrative. Okay. In the sense that it does lapse in a big amount of time. I was working on it with a mentor, right? And she was, I think she mentioned that it's difficult to follow sometimes the lapse of time. So I made that scheme and I sent her, and she said, you should include that with your manuscript. So that's that. You can tell I worked really hard on this, so that's why I still love it. So really, that's how. Right. Important thing to say, where I print them doesn't help me with formatting or anything, and I often give up with that sort of sense at that point usually. So I do just a basic format really. So not really doing very good format in that sense. So really, I think it's probably still Times Roman, and having the usual format. It looks not as pretty as probably could. I think I use size 11 for letters, if I remember correctly, A5 format, and that's a printout of it, right? I learned a lot from the process of doing these books, and one of the things that I learned is on my first one, I forgot to number pages. And that's one of the things I usually forget to do on my files quite commonly. So I started making the top sort of corner with like the name, like a header, right? A header with a page and a name to help keep the track of it, especially in my manuscripts when I'm working on different manuscripts at a time, right? It doesn't look like a thick book, right? It does not look like a thick book, but it's 90,000 words, right? So it is definitely quite thick in size for me. So in the sense of pages, it ended up being 267 pages. So the other thing I learned, in case anyone else considers to, publish, print, or anything about their books, one of the first things that I do when I get the proof is really looking because I don't really mind, I'm not selling them. I don't really mind if they're not really pretty inside. It's just really to store my manuscript in a shelf. I really looked up at, in the sense of formatting, I always look at the gaps, because once you've written a certain amount of manuscripts, your eye is almost trained to see if there's too many spaces in the lines and in between the lines. So I didn't quite like the picture showed off because there's a lot of dialogue, so it's a bit bumpy on the side, right? But there are things in between paragraphs and spaces at the name of a new chapter. I, try not to leave like the name of, make sure new chapter is not like just at the end of a page. So that sort of things that I do when I do receive a proof. I don't really, look at it all in the detail all again because it would take a lot of time. One of the bigger things for me was I have this puzzle, right? It's like a code puzzle. So the spacing in that to make sure it's kind of understandable. So it's actually, I'm very, in proof copy, I wasn't too happy with it, but actually I'm very happy with it in this version. Yeah. Other thing, I'm gonna bend the book just by showing it. Other thing to say, so this is a good version of it. I did ask them to do a free copies because I do wanna give it to friends, even though it's not finished, it's not published, it's not varied enough. Anyway, I wanted to give it to friends who helped me to, read it through some of the first materials. So I made 3 copies. I think there probably were more people who I had read, initial chapters, but I'm not super super proud of this unfinished product, so I didn't want to make a bigger amount, but I made 3 copies. Only the 2, as far as I'm aware, only the 2 copies are actually printed correctly. So that's the second one. So the 2 copies are printed correctly. They bound it wrongly. So we cut off the last page from this version, right? And we bound it into this book. So that's the last page where it should be. I was very confused when I opened it. There should be the scheme, right? So I don't know how to correct this. I don't mind it because again, I'm not selling it, but I don't feel like these are versions I'm gonna give away. So probably the good versions that I'm gonna give away. One obviously is for my keeping. So I got an extra book anyway, so I might just either keep them both. But I think it's a little bit of a waste because I could additionally give away a copy, even though it's not a good copy. Anyway, I leave it for a moment, but that was my book and I could talk a lot about it. I haven't really touched the manuscript of it for like now at least a year because it's just been lying around, and that's why I needed to print it and put it in a shelf in that sense. Because I felt like I'm finished with it. I moved on. And I don't want it to be there as a reminder that it needs to be corrected or I need to work more on it because the story already passed. Well, I hope a little bit of, telling about my books was helpful in that sense that if you're printing your own or you publish, self-publishing, maybe you get it as an advice. Other thing I kept never included in the first books, and I did learn through this is like a 4th book for me in sense of printing and shelving. I learned to ask them to include the spine because it's not in the original order that I could select to add the spine or create my own spine. So I always now ask to add the spine, which is brilliant. And the company did it so well in the sense it's like it was much cheaper, I think, this time around. And I got it very quick around within like a week of since submitting. So it was brilliant. We done really, really well. Now, the thing that kept me really excited, and we all arrived at the same time, is my pins. Let's talk about it. Okay, so I received my pins that I talked about when I was talking about my stickers. Okay, oh dear. I literally just unpacked them today. So we came in 2 bags because there's 2 designs with the pins. And these 2 bags say it's 50 because that's what I ordered. Okay. However, for some reason, few of them were separated in a separate bag. So I don't know if these have any flaws on them or we couldn't just fit to make 50 in the bags. I'm not quite sure. But even the ones in the small bags are gorgeous. So I'm really, really happy I don't remember my design being that gorgeous. I was sure it's not gonna turn out right because I never made pins before, so anyone can make them, clearly, which was great. So I actually, because I never made pins before, and that made me a bit braver, asked from the company, I have these designs and what sort of size I should be using. I want them to be smaller. So we replied, and I ordered by that reply. They are absolutely brilliant. Okay, I'm gonna make backings. So it had a big carton paper, right? Thick paper from, I don't know, it came with something else. I don't remember what it came with, but I thought I could use it for backing. So I wanna just paint over, paint over. I'll put a picture once I'm done. Paint over it, make my own backings. I'm not, again, I don't have a plan to sell these pins. I'm planning to give away, to some of my friends or colleagues. But I'm probably gonna have a bunch left. But to be honest, it's so gorgeous. I'm happy to order more if I do run out, because look at them. Okay, I did the design myself. I'm gonna show them on backings, it might be clearer. But one of them says "Grow Stars," and the other one says "Brave Sprite." And oh dear, it's not very good camera. I'll probably add in the picture to see it better, but it's definitely very gorgeous in detail. And it turned out you can read the words very well, even though, I didn't read, I literally just wrote it by hand. My writing is terrible. So it's beautiful. And the size is perfect because it's so tiny, right? I love it. And the human is cut out, which was my intention, which is brilliant. And, it turned out lovely. I really, really like it. It's so much better than my own design, I think. Anyway, I was pleasantly surprised about it. And the colors, definitely, after we sent me a proof copy again of the colors, it looked different. It looks very orangey, and it was like, oh, it doesn't look as great, but actual result is definitely closer to what I intended, and even better, let's say. Anyway, what I want to say, these are the designs, again, based on my middle grade book about this Sprite cookie, which I obviously, for limiting colors, I had to change his design a little bit from what I usually draw him as, but he's still sort of similar to recognize. And obviously there is a scene of growing stars, which I think I might have mentioned, and generally there's a lot of attention to stars. And that's why I thought these two, it's just so cute. Anyway, so that's about that. I hope that wasn't too, boring. And yeah, please support me.